I recently read Man's Search for Meaning by author Viktor Frankl. The meaning of life is to make life meaningful. Since meaning varies from day to day and hour to hour, it's up to you and I to constantly search for meaning in our lives and generate a feeling of meaning. This takes work, but if we succeed, we activate the single greatest source of productive energy human beings possess. If we fail, however, we'll slowly fall into darkness and lose the will to live. Viktor Frankl, a survivor of 4 Nazi concentration camps, saw this firsthand. When a prisoner in the concentration camp would lose hope and refuse to get out of bed for another day of forced labor, he would pull out a cigarette he'd been hiding in his jacket and start smoking. Frankl says their meaning orientation had subsided, and consequently, the seeking of immediate pleasure had taken over. At that moment, we knew that for the next 48 hours or so, we would watch them die. After spending 3 years in Nazi concentration camps, Frankl realized that it was often the loss of meaning that took prisoners' lives, and less the lack of food or medicine. After World War II, Frankl continued to see how critical meaning was in people's lives. As a psychiatrist, Frankl witnessed patients who lacked meaning be quickly consumed with addiction, anger, and depression. The loss of meaning had created an existential void in their life that was quickly filled with despair, like a poisonous gas filling up a room. But by helping patients through a form of therapy called Logotherapy, logo which is Greek for meaning, he helped his patients fill their internal emptiness, eliminate despair, and activate an unlimited source of productive energy. While being forced to find meaning during his time in Nazi concentration camps and helping others find meaning as a psychiatrist, Frankl found that there are 3 primary sources of meaning, what I've come to call the 3 wells of meaning: pursuing a life task, loving selflessly, and suffering bravely. Meaning well number 1, pursuing a life task. When Frankl entered the infamous Auschwitz death camp, Nazi guards stripped Frankl of all his possessions and confiscated a manuscript he'd been working on for his entire adult life. After a period of shock and disbelief, Frankl vowed to survive the death camp to one day rewrite and complete that manuscript. When he was suffering from typhus and on the brink of death, he used scraps of paper he collected around the camp and started making shorthand notes to start the reconstruction of his manuscript. Frankl knew that the manuscript was a piece of work that only he could write. No one had his collection of experiences, knowledge, and skills to bring that valuable work into the world. He knew that he had to make it out of the camp to pursue his life's task, because if he died, his work would be lost forever. If you died today, there would be a task that you and only you could have completed, a piece of work that required your unique collection of experiences, knowledge, and strengths. Maybe there was a lecture you were meant to give in the future, a project you were meant to contribute to, a team you were meant to lead, or a book you were meant to write. Frankl says, in the Nazi concentration camps, one could have witnessed that those who knew that there was a task waiting for them to fulfill were most apt to survive. So what task awaits you? If you don't know, set out on a quest to discover your life's task. Wake up each day with the goal of having new experiences, acquiring new knowledge, and developing a rare and valuable combination of skills. When you feel like you need to prepare for a task that you and only you can do, a task you were born to do, life feels meaningful. Meaning well number 2, loving selflessly. Before the war, Frankl met a distraught woman who had lost a son and had another son who was severely handicapped. Prior to meeting Frankl, she had tried to commit suicide with her disabled son, but her son stopped her. To help her regain a sense of meaning in her life and activate her will to live, he asked her to imagine herself at 80 years old, looking back at a life that was full of pleasure and free of the burden of taking care of her disabled son. After some reflection, she told Frankl, "Looking back as an old woman, I cannot see what it was all for. Actually, I must say my life was a failure." Then Frankl asked her to imagine a life dedicated to taking care of her handicapped son. After some reflection, she told Frankl, "I have made a fuller life possible for him. I have made a better human being out of my son. I can look back peacefully on my life, for I can say my life was full of meaning." Frankl's definition of love is different than most. It has little to do with the feeling of being in love, and more about struggling to help others succeed. To Frankl, love is an act of seeing the potential in others, which is not yet actualized. Love is elevating people around you. It's creating opportunities for your child. It's mentoring a junior member of your team. It's introducing your friend to someone who might help them find a career that better aligns with their interests. It's meeting a friend for coffee to help them brainstorm ideas for their latest business venture. It's being with a sick parent so they can find the strength to live another day. When you lack meaning, decide every morning who you will help elevate. See the person or group of people whose life you will try to make a little bit better. Get so busy working to help others that you forget yourself in the process. As Frankl says, the more one forgets himself by giving himself to another person to love, the more human he is and the more he actualizes himself. Meaning well, number 3, suffering bravely. Over the 3 years spent in the Nazi concentration camps, Frankl endured unimaginable amounts of suffering, but he found a way to transcend that suffering by imagining himself standing on a platform of a well-lit, warm, and pleasant lecture room. In the book, he says, I imagine myself giving a lecture on the psychology of the concentration camp, and all that oppressed me at that moment became objective, seen and described from the remote viewpoint of science. By this method, I succeeded somehow in rising above the situation, above the suffering of the moment, and I observed them as if they were already of the past. When Nelson Mandela was thrown in prison for an unjust amount of time, he saw and later used his suffering as a way to inspire millions around South Africa to forgive their enemies and work together to rebuild a nation. His suffering had a purpose. As Frankl says, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. Whenever an unexpected, uncontrollable setback happens in your life, find meaning in it to prevent the suffering from turning into despair. Look at suffering objectively and ask yourself, how might this be valuable? Often the greatest value in suffering is how it strengthens your character. When you think of your favorite movie, then think of your favorite character in that movie. They had to endure some sort of suffering, and through that suffering, you discovered who they were and what they stood for. Imagine yourself a character in a movie, and when you find yourself suffering, see it as an opportunity to strengthen your beliefs, your values, and your ideals, and inspire others by doing so. Frankl says, by accepting the challenge to suffer bravely, life has a meaning up to the last moment, and it retains this meaning literally till the end. The most important task every day is to find meaning and make life meaningful. We can make life meaningful by preparing and searching for our life's task, by elevating others, and by choosing to see suffering as a valuable opportunity to learn and strengthen our character. The more you're able to find meaning from hour to hour and day to day, the more likely you'll get to the end of your life and be proud of the life you lived. That was the core message that I gathered from Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. This book will change the way you look at your work and life. I highly recommend it. If you would like a one-page PDF summary of insights that I gathered from this book, just click the link below and I'd be happy to email it to you. If you've already subscribed to the free Productivity Game email newsletter, this PDF is sitting in your inbox. If you like this video, please share it. And as always, thanks for watching and have yourself a productive week.